pretty dramatic, doesn't it? But I say that because I have personally experienced an incredible amount of power and energy from spiritual groups, from spiritual friends. This last retreat I went on, I did this a few years ago. I was invited into this Dharma leader training program for Spirit Rock and IMS. And I met several people there. Became really close to them. Deep, when you go through a really intense training, you form these heartfelt bonds, right? And so I went on this last 6-week retreat, and it was really intense. But there were 3 women that were in that training with me there on retreat at the same time I was. And I got so much solace, so much support, so much love from these 3 people, even though we were never talking. And we sat down at dinner table every evening together, and we would just lovingly smile at one another while we were eating our little crackers. But I just feel so much love and support from their presence, from them being there, because I was already connected to them in a powerful way. So this retreat was the first one that I've had people that I love there on retreat with me. So that was really special. And it reminded me of the power of Sangha, the importance of Sangha. Right? So tonight I'm going to talk about Sangha, what Sangha means to me, because everyone has a different interpretation. I'm going to talk about what Sangha meant to the Buddha in Buddhism, and whatever else comes up around Sangha. So I think I did, at first, misunderstand Sangha when I first started this path. I didn't want to meet anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to slide in and meditate, go on these retreats and slide out without meeting anybody, right? And it took me a while to figure out that Buddhism and this Buddhist practice is not a solitary path. Even though we're meditating alone, it's not a solitary path. Right? And Norman Fisher says seeing it this way is a mistake. Norman Fisher is a Zen Buddhist teacher. But as soon as I opened my heart to Sangha, I started feeling all of this love and this support. Anybody notice that when you come here to meditate, your meditation practice goes much quicker in a group than at home? Mm-hmm. Right? I never realized how powerful Sangha and group was, spiritual friends, until I did a month-long silent meditation retreat on my own once. And that was the longest 31 days of my life. I didn't think I was going to make it. And every so often, a person from the Sangha would come into my house, because I opened it up to the Sangha, with Sangha. I don't think any of you were there. And every so often, one of the Sangha members would show up and meditate with me for a couple hours, and then leave, or bring me a dish or food. And then I was like, kind of like a dry plant getting water. It's just energetically, something happens when we get together and we connect with one another. And I don't want to get airy-fairy woo-woo with you, because I don't know what that is. Right? But did any of you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Right? It's something happens, and it's something amazingly powerful and supportive. But it shouldn't be so weird, because as we know, humans are social animals, right? I talk about this a lot. There's a growing body of research showing that humans need to connect socially, and that with others, and that this is a basic human need as much as the need for water and shelter and food, right? We're wired to need social connection. Research is now coming out that shows that people heal best in groups, right? They learn best in groups. We grow spiritually faster in groups. There's just a lot of evidence to show that groups can be very helpful. There's also a part of us that longs for, and maybe I'm projecting from my own self here, but most of us that longs for deep, authentic connection with other people. There's a part of us that yearns to be understood, to be heard, to be loved, and to be able to hear, connect with, and love another being. And I'm not talking about romantically, I'm just talking about spiritually. And yet, does our culture promote any of this? Not really, right? No, our culture promotes individualism, being alone, living in our insulated little worlds. It's no wonder that coffee and tea houses are getting really popular now. Right? But then even when you go to a coffee house, half the people are plugged in and doing in their own little insulated selves there too, right? Yeah. So I had aversion, like I said, to connecting with groups when I first started. I had faith in my ability to meditate and to just go for it, but I didn't have any faith in other people. So I was somewhat cynical and protected, armored from other people. And my parents had this quote on the fridge, so I was conditioned this way. And I don't remember the exact quote. I actually emailed them. They're in Belize right now. I was like, what was that quote you had? But it was something like, independence is the birth and growth of the exceptional mind, whereas organization is the death and security, creating an ordinary mind. Right? So this was their mindset, that as soon as you get in some kind of organization, you're going to die or be limited by the organization, which I can understand some of that philosophy. Whereas you'll give birth when you break free from organization. So I was dealing with a lot of that conditioning and changed my mind. But back in the days of the Buddha in India in the 5th century BC, there were literally hundreds of different spiritual traditions and spiritual teachers in that general area where he lived. And in order to become a follower of one of these teachers, you were supposed to take refuge in their group, take refuge with that teacher. So taking refuge was a tradition that they had in India back then. And in order to become a follower of the Buddha's tradition, it wasn't called the Buddha's tradition, it wasn't called Buddhism, but in order to take refuge with Siddhartha Gautama, you had to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And then when you took the 5 precepts also, then you became a follower of, you got accepted into the group. Now they had different groups. They had monastic groups, the female monastic group, they had the male monastic group, they had the female lay group, and the male lay group. Okay? So they considered to have 4 separate groups back then, or 4 separate sanghas. So the sangha originally was a group of enlightened beings. So if we were studying with the Buddha and one of us popped, right, and reached the first level of enlightenment, then we would get to be admitted into the sangha. Okay? So originally it was just the most enlightened beings. They had to reach one of the 4 levels of enlightenment to get into the Sangha. They were considered the most wise ones. And then the ones in the Sangha that became teachers of the ones who hadn't reached enlightenment yet. Right? So they became the supporters of everyone else. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that when any of us is in the presence of someone who has a very deep practice, who has deeper wisdom, that energy supports us and rubs off on us, so to speak. And there are all kinds of stories about the Buddha telling one talk to people, and just based on his presence and his talk, they reached enlightenment, right? But most of the people who reached enlightenment were practicing diligently for many years before they ever met the Buddha. Right? They were meditating and doing spiritual practices. So you might have heard the story about one time the Buddha's assistant, Ananda, came to him and he was exclaiming how wonderful spiritual friendship is. Spiritual friendship's so important. And he asked Siddhartha Gautama, spiritual friendship is so important. It must be at least half of the holy life, the importance of half of the holy life. And the Buddha said, no, Ananda, having good friends, spiritual friends, isn't half of the holy life. It's the whole of the holy life. So he was exclaiming that spiritual friendships is the whole of the holy life. It's like the most important part and a needed element for having a strong spiritual life. In another sutta, the Magaya Sutta, they tell the story of this eager young monk, Magaya, who wanted to reach enlightenment. And he had this fantasy of going out into the beautiful mango grove where it's very silent and beautiful, and meditating and reaching enlightenment diligently in this mango grove, right? And he went out there to practice, and he usually had a pretty calm mind. But what he found was a snarl of malicious, lustful, and confused thoughts that wouldn't leave him alone. He couldn't even get one moment of peace in his meditation practice. So he was so confused, he went back to the Buddha and he told him what was going on. The Buddha was not surprised. So he gave him some advice. The Buddha gave Magaya some advice. He told Magaya, 5 things induce release of heart and lasting peace. First, a loving intimacy with good friends. Second, virtuous conduct. Third, frequent conversation that inspires and encourages practice. Fourth, diligence, energy, and enthusiasm for what is good. And fifth, insight into impermanence. And then he went on to repeat himself that, to cement his point, that when there is loving intimacy between friends, then there will be virtuous conduct. When there is loving intimacy with friends and virtuous conduct, then you're going to have frequent conversations that inspire and encourage further practice. And then with those things comes more diligence, energy, enthusiasm, and with all of those comes automatically the insight into impermanence. But what was the first one? The loving intimacy, right? With good friends. He said everything flows from that. Everything flows from that. So once again, he's saying, get out of the mango grove. Come and practice with some of your dear friends in a spiritual path. And that will support you and that will help you here. So in our, I guess the West is kind of an experiment all the lay communities that we have here. The lays are not monastics. So there are monastic monasteries, communities, but there are a lot of lay communities like this one being led by lay teachers. Okay? But what are we doing? We are coming here to practice our mindful awareness so that we can connect with whatever our present moment experience is. Right? According to this path of practice, our primary goal is to connect with how our suffering, our dukkha, how we cause suffering for ourselves, and then how we can break free from this suffering that we're creating for ourselves and others. And then, with this wisdom, become more awake, more alive, more engaged, happier, more peaceful, right? But it's much easier to do this in a group than it is to do it alone. So we can support each other in this path and seeing one another's or our own dukkha. We can share with one another what we've learned. And we can learn from one another's trials, tribulations, and successes. Right? It's so supportive. And it's supportive because a lot of us have common moral values. You know, coming into a room full of people who all really care about being compassionate and kind to themselves and compassionate and kind with others, and finding out and connecting with what's most important to them is so palpable. Here's Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, a Sangha is a community of friends practicing the Dharma together in order to bring about and to maintain awareness. The essence of the Sangha is awareness, understanding, acceptance, harmony, and love. We should put that on the wall, huh? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be a great thing to aspire for in our Sangha? But according to the Buddha, only people who were living virtuously were allowed to be in the Sangha. Here's another one of his quotes in the Anguttara Nikaya. Just as the great ocean does not associate with a corpse, but quickly carries it to the coast and washes it ashore, so too the Sangha does not associate with a person who is immoral, of bad character, impure, of suspect behavior, secretive in one's actions, not an ascetic but claiming to be one, not a celibate but claiming to be one, inwardly rotten, corrupt, depraved. Rather, it quickly assembles and expels this person. He was pretty dramatic, wasn't he? Expels them. So basically what they're saying, if a person creates problems and corrupts, poisons the well, so to speak, with their negativity or their dishonesty, what kind of things, just one word, might someone be doing in a Sangha that might bring poison, might poison the well? Cussing, you said?
Gossip.
Gossip. Lying.
Stealing.
Controlling.
Manipulation. Right? So, yeah. So people that are creating negative drama or gossip or poisoning the well or being mean, excluding others, putting oneself ahead of someone else, all of this is not taking care of our Sangha. That's poisoning the well. So that's something that we might want to expel. Right? Okay. The other thing the Buddha taught was that we need to take care of our Sangha members. Who's going to take care of our Sangha members if we don't? So he was big on that. He said, "He who attends on the sick attends on me." And there's so many stories about the Buddha coming across one of his monks who were sick. He came upon one who was soiled in their robes because they were desperately ill with an attack of acute dysentery. And he went, rolled his sleeves up, got water, and bathed, and cleaned, and dressed this sick monk in order to help him. And then he went and told the other monks that you need to take care of each other. We need to take care of each other. Right? And then he went on to say, if the teacher is ill, it is the duty of the pupil to look after the teacher. If the pupil is ill, it's the teacher's duty to look after the sick pupil. If a teacher or a pupil is not available, it is the responsibility of the community to look after the sick. So we're kind of lacking in these things in our community, I believe. Not necessarily this one, but in our bigger overarching community. But several of you probably are volunteering. How many of you volunteer to help in different organizations? Yeah, see, you're already doing this. So taking refuge in the Sangha is appreciating, receiving, giving support. It's giving encouragement. It's sharing your journey together. Right? But that's why we have the sharing period at the end. Sometimes we get together dyad, sometimes big group shares, but we do that so that we can find out how each other's practices are going, we can connect with one another, right? It's very important to, it was intentional on my part to make sure that we had that connection period. But then how much people share or feel comfortable sharing is up to each individual, right? And it's a practice for us to notice what's arising for us when someone, in our maybe estimation, overshares. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was one fellow who used to come every Thursday night. He's moved away years ago. And then he quit coming. And I said, what happened to you? Why haven't you been coming? He came Sunday. He said, I can't stand the sharing. If one more person tells their story or cries, or he said, no, I can't stand it. So he was not in a place of open-hearted connection with each other's sharing, and he was clear that he wasn't able to participate in that. And that's fine. We're all in a different place. But I find that when we share from the heart, it's a gift to others. But we only want to share it to the extent that we feel safe and comfortable sharing. It's not unusual in our community with someone to push our buttons. I'm sure you have no buttons, right? Do you know what I mean by pushing your buttons? Right? Here you are, you come to a spiritual group, you come to open your heart and to connect and grow and love and feel peace, right? And then all of a sudden there's your father sitting right across from you in the Sangha, or your worst enemy, your brother, or someone that has been your nemesis your whole life. Maybe an ex sitting right across from you. And we have to learn to deal with these people. And what's nice is it's an opportunity to learn to open our hearts to deal with these type of difficult people. If they're not one of the ones that the Buddha was talking about, the inwardly rotten and corrupt and depraved, right? Then that person is our teacher in order to open our hearts to them and see what's going on inside of us that we're holding on to, what are we clinging to that we can let go of in order to connect with more ease, so that this person ends up becoming a valued friend. Has anybody had someone that was an enemy before, or just difficult person who became a friend? So I see that as a challenge. If I have a difficulty with someone, it's a challenge for me to see, okay, what am I holding on to that I can let go of? Emerson and the Buddha both believe that spiritual friendships require two elements, truth and tenderness. So being honest with one another, being honest with ourselves. That means if someone's rubbing me raw, I'm not going to pretend like they're not. I may not go and tell them, you're really rubbing me raw, but I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay. I'm not going to gloss that over and just say, let me just sparkle my shoes and it'll be better tomorrow. No. Truth is really important. If someone really has done something to harm us, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it takes a lot of courage to be able to go to this person and say, hey, what was your intention when you said so-and-so? Because I really, felt some pain there. So you can work it out with your spiritual friends. That's what spiritual friends do. They work out on all their edges together. Right? They take risks. They show courage. And they're tender. They're kind. Have the overarching intention to be kind to one another. Right? This tenderness. This is what Dogen, Zen Master Dogen wrote. Speak to sentient beings as you would to a baby. Speak with that much tender love and sweetness. I can receive a true friend's criticism with loving kindness because it comes from a loving heart, seeking only my benefit and well-being. And if I am lacking in tenderness, speaking what I consider to be truth out of defensiveness or separateness, I have to discern this. I have to work on healing the causes within myself of this breach of kindness. I need to keep my peace until I'm ready to speak with love. Easier said than done. But it's a great aspect to work towards, or So the Buddha thought of the Sangha as a harmonious group of spiritual friends, looking out for another's welfare, teaching each other, helping each other, calling each other out if need be. And Norman Fisher said that in Buddhism we practice together, we awaken together, we understand together. Together we go forth to do what needs to be done. So I brought this up, Sangha, because I've recently heard for years I've been hearing people say things like, Sangha's good but not satisfying all my expectations, so I'm gone to other Sanghas as well. Or I really like you, but the Sangha doesn't, I don't get what I want from your Sangha. So there's expectation, there's wanting, there's looking for something in particular, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we need certain energies that are calling for it to be healed or fulfilled, so we go to where we can get that. But if there's just general having all these expectations and clinging or wanting, that's, according to Buddhism, an unwholesome desire. Right? And the only reason I bring this up is because our society, our consumeristic society, that is constantly looking for what I can buy, what I can pay for, that's what I can get. We are swimming in this soup of what can I get? Everywhere we go, what can I get from this? In our relationships, in our purchasing, so this is a nuanced place to look at. Do we have expectations? Are we trying to get something, right? Because this could potentially be rooted in clinging and desire, which is the root of suffering, craving. So I like to think of what your Sangha can do for you, but what you can do for your Sangha. Because this is coming from a place of generosity, from open-hearted giving. It's giving back because you've received so much, perhaps, you know. Here's a quote by Sybil Custer. The world we live in has been compared to a web. If you touch a spider web in one place, the whole web quivers. Our vibrations, our thoughts, what we do, all send a quiver through the web of this planet. May the vibrations that we each send out this moment, this day, be for the healing and comfort and upliftment of all. So those were some of my, I had so many thoughts on Sangha, I didn't say them all, but just setting a little bit of a context. But what Sangha means to each person is going to be an individualized thing, right? So thank you for listening.